Maria Rodriguez walked through the glass doors of Westfield Shopping Center at exactly 6:30 in the morning. The sun was just starting to peek over the tall buildings around the mall. She carried her black coffee in one hand and her security radio in the other. Her navy blue uniform was perfectly pressed and her silver badge shined under the bright mall lights. For 3 years, Maria had been walking these same hallways every morning. She knew every corner of this place. She knew which stores opened first and which ones always had trouble with their security alarms. She knew the names of all the store managers and even remembered the birthdays of some of their children. This job was not just work for Maria, it was her life. The early morning hours were always quiet at the mall. Only a few store employees would be arriving to prepare for the day. Maria liked this peaceful time. She could walk slowly through each section and check that everything was safe and secure from the night before. She would test door handles and look for any signs of trouble. Her careful attention had prevented several break-ins over the years, but today felt different somehow. Maria could not explain why, but something seemed wrong. Maybe it was the way the new security supervisor, James Fletcher, had been looking at her lately. Maybe it was the strange phone call she had noticed him making in his office. Or maybe it was just the feeling that changes were coming and not good ones. Maria had worked hard to get this job 3 years ago. She had been unemployed for 6 months after losing her previous job at a small office building. Her mother was getting older and needed help paying for her medicine. Her younger brother, Carlos, was studying at the community college to become a nurse. The family needed Maria to have steady work and good benefits. When she first applied at Westfield Shopping Center, the old security manager, Mr. Patterson, had been impressed with her application. Maria had taken security training classes and had references from her previous jobs. Mr. Patterson told her that he needed someone reliable and honest, someone who would treat the job seriously and care about protecting the stores and customers. Maria proved herself quickly in those first months. She learned the layout of the entire mall, including the storage areas and maintenance tunnels that most people never saw. She memorized the emergency procedures and became certified in first aid. When customers had medical emergencies, or children got lost, Maria was always ready to help. The store owners grew to trust her completely. Mrs. Chen, who owned the jewelry store, would always wave when Maria walked by on her rounds. The teenage employees at the clothing stores knew they could ask Maria for help if customers became difficult. Even the cleaning crew appreciated that Maria treated everyone with respect no matter what job they did. Everything started changing 6 months ago when the mall ownership changed hands. A big company from another state bought Westfield Shopping Center. They said they wanted to make improvements and increase profits. The first thing they did was replace Mr. Patterson with James Fletcher. Fletcher was different from Mr. Patterson in every way possible. He was younger and wore expensive suits instead of security uniforms. He talked about cutting costs and improving efficiency. He questioned why the mall needed so many security guards and suggested that cameras could do most of the work instead. From his first day, Fletcher seemed to have a problem with Maria. He would interrupt her when she was talking to store managers. He criticized her reports even when they were complete and accurate. He made comments about whether women could really handle security work, especially if there was any physical confrontation. Maria tried to ignore Fletcher's attitude at first. She had dealt with difficult supervisors before. She focused on doing her job well and hoped that Fletcher would eventually see that she was a valuable employee. But his behavior only got worse as the weeks went by. Fletcher started assigning Maria to the least important duties. Instead of patrolling the main shopping areas, she was sent to watch empty storage rooms or monitor parking lots during slow periods. He scheduled her for the worst shifts, including late nights and early mornings on weekends. When she asked about the changes, he said the schedule was based on performance evaluations. The other security guards noticed what was happening, but they were afraid to say anything. 2 guards had already been fired since Fletcher arrived. Both had been longtime employees who questioned some of his new policies. The message was clear to everyone. Do not cross James Fletcher or you will lose your job. Maria became more and more frustrated, but she could not afford to quit. Her mother had been diagnosed with diabetes and needed expensive medication every month. Carlos was in his final year of nursing school and would graduate in just 6 more months. The family was depending on Maria's steady paycheck and health insurance benefits. One evening in early November, Maria was working the late shift when she decided to review some of the Security camera footage from the previous night. This was part of her regular duties. She would check the recordings to make sure nothing unusual had happened after the mall closed. What she saw on the screen made her heart stop beating for a moment. The timestamp showed 11:30 at night, long after all the stores were closed. But there on the camera were three figures walking through the main hallway. One of them was clearly James Fletcher. The other two were managers she recognized from the mall office. Maria watched in shock as the three men used keys to enter several different stores. They were not there for any official business. They were taking merchandise and putting it into large bags. Electronics from the technology store, clothing from the department store, even jewelry from Mrs. Chen's shop. She fast-forwarded through more footage and saw them loading the stolen items into Fletcher's personal car in the parking garage. This was not just one incident. As she checked more recordings from different nights, she found the same pattern repeating over and over again. Fletcher and his associates were systematically stealing from the very stores they were supposed to protect. Maria sat alone in the security office, staring at the frozen image on the computer screen. Her hands were shaking as she realized what she had discovered. Fletcher was not just a bad supervisor. He was a criminal who was using his position to steal thousands of dollars worth of merchandise. She thought about all the store owners who trusted the security team to keep their businesses safe. She thought about Mrs. Chen, who always smiled and waved during the morning rounds. She thought about all the employees who worked hard to earn honest livings while Fletcher was stealing from their employers. But she also thought about her own situation. If she reported Fletcher, she would definitely lose her job. He would make sure of that. And without her paycheck, her family would be in serious trouble. Her mother might not be able to afford her medication. Carlos might have to drop out of school so close to graduation. The weight of the decision pressed down on her shoulders as she sat in the quiet security office. Outside, the mall was dark and empty. Inside, Maria was facing the most difficult choice of her life. She could pretend she had never seen the footage and continue working for a criminal supervisor. Or she could risk everything to do what she knew was right. As she sat there in the silence, Maria remembered something her father had told her before he died when she was just 16 years old. He had said that a person's character is not measured by what they do when things are easy. Character is shown by the choices people make when doing the right thing costs them something important. Maria looked at her reflection in the dark computer screen. She saw a woman who had always tried to do her job with honesty and integrity. She saw someone who cared about protecting others and standing up for what was right. She realized that she could not live with herself if she stayed silent about what Fletcher was doing. The decision was made even though she knew it would change her life forever. Maria barely slept that night after discovering the security footage. She kept thinking about what she had seen on those camera recordings. Fletcher and his friends walking through the mall like they owned it, taking whatever they wanted from the stores, loading stolen goods into their cars like common thieves. Every time she closed her eyes, she could see Fletcher's face on the security monitor. The way he had looked so confident and careless as he broke into store after store. He thought no one was watching. He thought no one would ever find out what he was doing. But Maria had found out, and now she had to decide what to do about it. The next morning, Maria arrived at work earlier than usual. She wanted time to think and plan before Fletcher showed up for his shift. The mall was quiet and peaceful in the early hours, but Maria's mind was racing with questions and worries. She sat in the security office staring at the computer screen that had changed everything the night before. Maria knew she needed to be very careful about what she did next. If Fletcher discovered that she had found the evidence of his crimes, he would find a way to destroy it. He would probably fire her immediately and make sure she could never prove what she had seen. She needed to gather more evidence before she made any moves. Over the next 3 days, Maria worked like a detective investigating a case. Every chance she got, she would review more security footage from previous weeks and months. She discovered that Fletcher's stealing had been going on for much longer than she had first thought. It was not just a few isolated incidents. It was an organized plan that had been happening for months. Maria started keeping detailed notes about everything she found. She wrote down the exact dates and times when Fletcher entered each store. She made lists of what items he took and estimated how much money they were worth. She noted which other people were helping him and what roles each person played in the thefts. The more Maria investigated, the worse the situation became. Fletcher was not just stealing small items here and there. He was taking expensive electronics worth hundreds of dollars each, designer clothing and accessories that cost more than Maria made in a week, jewelry that was worth thousands of dollars from Mrs. Chen's shop. Maria realized that Fletcher had been very smart about covering his tracks. He never took too much from any one store at the same time. He spread the thefts out over many different nights so that store owners might not notice missing inventory right away. When items were discovered missing, Fletcher would blame it on shoplifting or poor inventory management by the store employees. But Maria could see the pattern clearly now that she knew what to look for. Fletcher always struck on nights when he was the supervisor on duty. He always brought the same two associates with him. They always used the service corridors and back entrances to avoid being seen by any late-night cleaning crews or maintenance workers. As Maria gathered more evidence, she also started paying closer attention to Fletcher's behavior during regular work hours. She noticed that he often made private phone calls in his office with the door closed. She saw him meeting with people who were not mall employees in the parking garage during his lunch breaks. She observed him being unusually friendly with certain store managers while being hostile toward others. Maria began to suspect that Fletcher's crime network was even bigger than the nighttime thefts. She wondered if he was also involved in other illegal activities like selling stolen goods or taking bribes from vendors. The more she learned about Fletcher, the more dangerous he seemed to become. By the end of the week, Maria had copied dozens of security video files onto flash drives that she kept hidden in her locker. She had photographed inventory discrepancies in several stores. She had documented every detail of Fletcher's criminal activities with precise dates, times, and dollar amounts. But gathering evidence was only the first step. Maria knew that she would need help to stop Fletcher and bring him to justice. She could not handle this situation by herself. She needed to find people who would believe her story and have the power to do something about it. Maria's first thought was to contact the police directly. But she worried that Fletcher might have connections with local law enforcement that could warn him about any investigation. She also knew that police departments were often slow to respond to white-collar crimes, especially when they involved workplace disputes. Maria decided that she should also contact the corporate headquarters of the company that owned the mall. Surely the executives would want to know that one of their managers was stealing from their tenants and damaging their reputation. But Maria was not sure how to reach the right people or whether they would take her seriously. Another option was to go directly to the store owners who were being robbed. Mrs. Chen and the other shop managers deserved to know what was happening to their merchandise. But Maria worried that if she told them about Fletcher's crimes, he would quickly find out and destroy all the evidence before anyone could stop him. Maria spent hours thinking about all these options. Each approach had advantages and disadvantages. Each one carried risks that could backfire and make the situation worse. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her shoulders. The decisions she made in the next few days would affect not just her own life but the lives of many other people. On Friday evening, Maria was reviewing her evidence one more time when she made another shocking discovery. While going through older security footage, she found recordings that showed Fletcher had not been working alone from the beginning. 2 other security guards who had been fired in recent months had also been involved in the thefts. Maria remembered those guards and how surprised everyone had been when Fletcher suddenly terminated them. Now she realized that Fletcher had probably gotten rid of them because they knew too much about his criminal activities. Maybe they had demanded bigger shares of the stolen goods. Maybe they had threatened to expose him. Either way, Fletcher had eliminated them to protect himself. This discovery made Maria even more determined to stop Fletcher, but it also made her more afraid. If Fletcher was willing to fire long-term employees to protect his crimes, what would he do to someone who was actively gathering evidence against him? Maria knew that she was putting herself in serious danger by investigating Fletcher's activities, but Maria also knew that she could not back down now. Too many people were being hurt by Fletcher's crimes. The store owners were losing money and merchandise. The honest employees were working for a corrupt supervisor who could not be trusted. The customers were shopping in a mall where the security team was actually the biggest threat to their safety. On Sunday night, Maria made her final decision. She would report Fletcher's crimes to the police first thing Monday morning. She would also contact the corporate headquarters and provide them with copies of all her evidence. She would tell the store owners what had been happening so they could protect themselves in the future. Maria spent Sunday evening organizing all her documentation and making multiple copies of everything. She prepared a detailed written report that explained exactly what she had discovered and when she had discovered it. She practiced what she would say to the police and corporate executives when she called them. As Maria got ready for bed Sunday night, she felt a mixture of fear and determination. She knew that Monday would be one of the most important days of her life. She knew that Fletcher would probably try to destroy her when he found out what she was doing, but she also knew that she was doing the right thing even if it cost her everything. Maria looked at herself in the bathroom mirror before brushing her teeth. She saw a woman who had found the courage to stand up against corruption and crime. She saw someone who was willing to risk her job and her family's financial security to protect other people from being victimized. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation that would change everything. Maria was ready to face whatever consequences came from telling the truth about James Fletcher and his criminal activities. Monday morning arrived gray and cold with heavy clouds hanging low over the city. Maria walked through the mall entrance at her usual time, but everything felt different today. Her heart was beating faster than normal and her hands felt sweaty despite the cool weather. She carried her evidence in a small bag along with her regular work items. Maria had barely reached the security office when she knew something was wrong. Fletcher was already there waiting for her, even though he normally did not arrive until much later in the morning. He was standing behind the main desk with his arms crossed and his face red with anger. Two other mall managers stood beside him looking uncomfortable but determined. The moment Maria walked through the door, Fletcher exploded with rage. His voice was so loud that people in nearby stores could probably hear every word he was shouting. He accused Maria of being a thief and a liar. He claimed that valuable merchandise had gone missing from several stores, and that she was the only person who could have taken it. Maria felt like she had been punched in the stomach. This was not how she had planned for the morning to go. She had intended to call the police and corporate headquarters before Fletcher even knew what was happening. But somehow he had discovered her investigation, and now he was attacking her first. Fletcher waved a folder full of papers in Maria's face. He claimed they were evidence that she had been stealing from the stores for months. He said security cameras had caught her taking items after hours. He insisted that other employees had reported seeing her acting suspiciously around the storage areas. Maria tried to defend herself and explained that she had evidence of the real crimes being committed. She started to tell Fletcher about the security footage she had found showing him and his associates stealing merchandise. But Fletcher would not let her speak. Every time she tried to say something, he shouted louder and accused her of lying. Other employees began gathering around the security office to see what was causing all the commotion. Store managers came out of their shops to investigate the shouting. Early morning shoppers stopped to stare at the scene unfolding near the security desk. Maria could see confusion and concern on their faces as they watched Fletcher screaming at her. Fletcher seemed to enjoy having an audience for his performance. He continued accusing Maria of theft while pointing his finger at her and making dramatic gestures. He claimed that the mall had been losing thousands of dollars because of her criminal activities. He said that she had betrayed the trust of everyone who worked there. Maria felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She would not give Fletcher the satisfaction of seeing her cry in front of all these people. She tried again to explain that she had evidence of his crimes, but he cut her off immediately. Fletcher reached across the desk and grabbed Maria's security badge. The metal pin caught on her uniform shirt and tore the fabric as he ripped it away from her. The sound of tearing cloth seemed very loud in the sudden silence that followed his shouting. Then Fletcher did something that shocked everyone who was watching. He ordered Maria to remove her uniform immediately, right there in front of all the employees and customers who had gathered around. He said she did not deserve to wear the security uniform after what she had done. Maria's face burned with shame and humiliation. She could not believe that Fletcher was demanding this in front of so many people. She looked around at the faces staring at her and saw a mixture of embarrassment and sympathy. Some people looked away because they could not bear to watch what was happening. But Maria knew she had no choice. Fletcher was her supervisor and he had the power to call the police and have her arrested if she refused to cooperate. With shaking hands, she unbuttoned her uniform shirt and removed it. She was wearing a plain white t-shirt underneath, but she still felt exposed and vulnerable. Fletcher was not satisfied with just taking her shirt. He also demanded her security radio, her keys, and any other equipment that belonged to the mall. Maria handed over each item while the crowd of onlookers watched in uncomfortable silence. She felt like she was being stripped of her dignity piece by piece. But Fletcher still was not finished with his cruel display. He gathered up Maria's uniform shirt along with her badge and radio and marched toward the main entrance of the mall. The crowd of employees and customers followed behind him like they were watching a parade. Maria had no choice but to follow too because she could not just abandon her belongings. Outside in the parking lot, Fletcher found a large metal trash can that was used for collecting litter. He threw Maria's uniform shirt into the can along with her badge and other equipment. Then he pulled out a lighter and set the whole pile on fire. The flames caught quickly and began consuming the navy blue fabric that Maria had worn with pride for 3 years. The synthetic material melted and gave off black smoke that rose into the gray morning sky. The smell was terrible and made some people step back from the trash can. Maria watched her uniform burn and felt something breaking inside her chest. This was more than just losing a job. This was public humiliation designed to destroy her reputation and make sure no one would ever believe anything she said about Fletcher's crimes. As the flames grew higher, Fletcher continued his verbal assault. He told the gathered crowd that Maria was a thief who had been caught red-handed. He said she was lucky that he was not pressing criminal charges against her. He warned everyone to stay away from her because she could not be trusted. Fletcher then turned directly to Maria and told her to leave the mall property immediately. He said that if she was ever seen anywhere near the shopping center again, he would call the police and have her arrested for trespassing. His voice was cold and threatening as he made these warnings. Maria stood there watching the last pieces of her uniform turn to ash in the metal trash can. The crowd of people around her was starting to break up as employees returned to their stores and customers continued with their shopping. But Maria felt frozen in place by the enormity of what had just happened. She thought about her mother waiting at home for news about how the day had gone. She thought about Carlos studying for his nursing exams and counting on her steady paycheck to help him finish school. She thought about all the bills and responsibilities that depended on the job she had just lost. But underneath all the fear and worry, Maria felt something else growing stronger. Fletcher had made a terrible mistake by humiliating her so publicly. He had been so focused on destroying her reputation that he had forgotten about the evidence she had gathered. The flash drives with security footage were still hidden in her car. The documentation of his crimes was still safe. Fletcher thought he had won by burning her uniform and driving her away from the mall. But Maria knew that this was just the beginning of the real battle. She had lost her job and her dignity, but she still had the truth. And the truth was more powerful than Fletcher's lies and intimidation. As Maria walked slowly toward her car, she made a silent promise to herself. Fletcher might have destroyed her uniform, but he had not destroyed her determination. She would find a way to expose his crimes and bring him to justice. The burned uniform would become a symbol of his cruelty, but it would also remind her why she had to keep fighting. The morning had started with Maria planning to report Fletcher's crimes through official channels. Now she realized she would need a different strategy. Fletcher had declared war on her in the most public and humiliating way possible. Maria was ready to fight back with everything she had. Maria drove home in complete silence after watching her uniform burn in the mall parking lot. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She could still smell the smoke from the burning fabric on her clothes. She could still hear Fletcher's cruel words echoing in her mind, but underneath all the pain and humiliation, something new was growing inside her. When Maria reached her small apartment, she sat in her car for several minutes before going inside. She needed time to think about what had just happened and what she was going to do next. Fletcher thought he had destroyed her by taking away her job and burning her uniform in front of everyone, but he had made a serious mistake by underestimating her determination. Maria finally went inside and immediately called her mother to explain that she would not be at work for a few days. She said she was feeling sick and needed to rest. This was not completely a lie because Maria did feel sick to her stomach about losing her job. But she was not ready to tell her family the whole truth about what Fletcher had done to her. After talking to her mother, Maria went to her bedroom and retrieved the bag containing all the evidence she had gathered over the past week. The flash drives with security footage were still there. The photographs and written documentation were still safe. Fletcher had destroyed her uniform, but he had not touched the most important things she possessed. Maria spread all her evidence across her kitchen table and began organizing it more carefully than ever before. She separated the video files by date and created detailed written descriptions of what each recording showed. She made copies of everything and stored them in different locations around her apartment. As Maria worked with her evidence, she began to see new patterns and connections that she had missed before. Fletcher's crimes were even more systematic and organized than she had first realized. He was not just stealing random merchandise when opportunities arose. He was targeting specific high-value items and coordinating with outside buyers who knew exactly what to request. Maria found security footage showing Fletcher meeting with strangers in the mall parking garage during his lunch breaks. These meetings always happened on the same days that thefts occurred in the evening. Maria realized that Fletcher was probably taking orders from these people and stealing exactly what they wanted to buy from him. The more Maria studied her evidence, the more convinced she became that Fletcher was running a major criminal operation. He was not just a corrupt mall supervisor who occasionally took things from stores. He was the leader of an organized theft ring that was stealing thousands of dollars worth of merchandise every month. But Maria also knew that having evidence was not enough by itself. She needed help from people who had the power and authority to stop Fletcher and bring him to justice. She needed lawyers and police officers and corporate executives who would take her seriously and act on the information she had gathered. Maria spent Tuesday morning researching lawyers who specialized in employment law and whistleblower protection. She found several attorneys in her city who had experience with cases involving workplace corruption and wrongful termination. She made a list of their phone numbers and began calling their offices to schedule consultations. The first two lawyers Maria called were too busy to meet with her for several weeks. The third lawyer was willing to see her that same afternoon, but wanted to charge a consultation fee that Maria could not afford. The fourth lawyer she called was named Sarah Chen, and she agreed to meet with Maria the next morning for a free initial consultation. Maria spent Tuesday evening preparing for her meeting with Sarah Chen. She organized her evidence into clear categories and wrote a timeline of events that explained how she had discovered Fletcher's crimes and what had happened when he found out about her investigation. She practiced telling her story out loud until she could explain everything clearly and calmly. Wednesday morning, Maria arrived at Sarah Chen's law office feeling nervous but determined. Sarah was a woman in her 40s who had built a successful practice representing employees who faced discrimination and retaliation in their workplaces. Her office walls were covered with awards and certificates showing her commitment to fighting for workers' rights. Sarah listened carefully as Maria told her story and showed her the evidence she had collected. The lawyer asked detailed questions about dates and times and procedures at the mall. She reviewed the security footage on Maria's flash drives and examined the photographs and written documentation. After spending 2 hours going through everything, Sarah told Maria that she had an extremely strong case for both criminal charges against Fletcher and a civil lawsuit for wrongful termination. Sarah explained that Maria's evidence was unusually complete and well organized. Most whistleblowers did not have such clear proof of the crimes they were reporting. Sarah also explained that there were laws protecting employees who reported criminal activities by their supervisors. Fletcher's retaliation against Maria was illegal, and the company that owned the mall could be held responsible for allowing it to happen. Maria could potentially recover substantial damages for lost wages, emotional distress, and punitive measures. But Sarah warned Maria that fighting Fletcher and the mall company would not be easy or quick. Corporate lawyers would try to discredit her testimony and claim that she was lying about the evidence she had gathered. Fletcher would probably hire his own attorney and might even try to file countercharges claiming that Maria was the real thief. Maria told Sarah that she understood the risks and was prepared to face whatever challenges came her way. She said that Fletcher had already destroyed her reputation and taken away her job. She had nothing left to lose by fighting back against his crimes. More importantly, she felt a responsibility to protect other employees and store owners from Fletcher's continued criminal activities. Sarah agreed to represent Maria in both the criminal case and the civil lawsuit. She explained that they would need to file complaints with multiple agencies, including the police department, the district attorney's office, and the state labor board. Sarah also recommended contacting the corporate headquarters of the mall ownership company to notify them about Fletcher's crimes. Over the next 2 days, Sarah helped Maria prepare formal complaints that would be filed with all the appropriate authorities. They worked together to create a comprehensive presentation that included copies of all the evidence along with detailed explanations of what each piece of documentation proved about Fletcher's criminal activities. Sarah also connected Maria with Detective Rodriguez from the police department's white-collar crime unit. Detective Rodriguez had experience investigating corporate theft and fraud cases. He agreed to meet with Maria and Sarah on Friday morning to review the evidence and discuss opening an official criminal investigation. But Sarah had another suggestion that surprised Maria. She recommended reaching out to investigative journalists at the local television station and newspaper. Sarah explained that media attention could put additional pressure on the authorities to take action quickly. It could also warn other potential victims about Fletcher's crimes. Maria was initially hesitant about involving the media. She worried that publicity would make her life even more difficult and complicated, but Sarah convinced her that telling her story publicly could help other employees who might be facing similar situations with corrupt supervisors. Thursday evening, Maria felt like she had assembled a team of professionals who could help her fight back against Fletcher effectively. She had an experienced lawyer who believed in her case. She had a detective who was willing to investigate Fletcher's crimes. She had journalists who wanted to tell her story to the public. Maria looked at herself in the bathroom mirror Thursday night and saw a different person than the one who had watched her uniform burn just 4 days earlier. She still felt angry about the humiliation Fletcher had put her through. But now she also felt empowered and hopeful about the future. Fletcher thought he had won by destroying her job and her reputation. But Maria was preparing to return to the mall with something much more powerful than a security uniform. She was coming back with the law on her side and the truth as her weapon. Fletcher had no idea what was about to hit him. Friday morning brought unexpected phone calls that changed everything for Maria. She was reviewing her legal documents with Sarah Chen when her cell phone started ringing. The number was not one she recognized, but something told her to answer it anyway. The voice on the other end belonged to James Wilson, a former security guard who had worked at the mall until Fletcher fired him 3 months earlier. James had heard rumors about what happened to Maria in the parking lot. Word was spreading quickly through the network of current and former mall employees. People were talking about the way Fletcher had humiliated her by burning her uniform in front of everyone. James said he needed to meet with Maria immediately because he had important information about Fletcher that she needed to know. Within an hour, James was sitting in Sarah Chen's law office telling his own story about Fletcher's corruption. James explained that Fletcher had fired him after he refused to participate in what Fletcher called special security duties. These special duties involved helping Fletcher and his associates move merchandise from stores to their cars during late-night hours. James had initially thought Fletcher was asking him to help with legitimate inventory transfers or security testing, but it quickly became clear that Fletcher was actually asking him to help steal merchandise from the stores they were supposed to protect. When James refused to participate and threatened to report the activity, Fletcher immediately fired him for poor performance. But James had been smart enough to document some of what he had witnessed before Fletcher got rid of him. He had taken photographs of Fletcher's associates loading stolen goods into their vehicles. He had written down license plate numbers and descriptions of the people involved. He had even recorded some conversations where Fletcher discussed selling stolen merchandise to buyers outside the mall. Sarah Chen was amazed by the additional evidence that James brought to their case. She explained that having a second witness who could testify about Fletcher's criminal activities would make their case much stronger in court. James agreed to join Maria's legal action and help expose Fletcher's crimes to the authorities. But James had even more surprising news for Maria. He told her that 2 other former employees had also been fired by Fletcher under suspicious circumstances. Linda Martinez had worked in the mall's administrative office until Fletcher claimed she was stealing petty cash from the security budget. Michael Thompson had been a maintenance worker until Fletcher accused him of damaging store property during routine repairs. James gave Maria the phone numbers for Linda and Michael. He suggested that all 3 former employees should meet together to compare their experiences and see if Fletcher had used similar tactics against each of them. Maria was excited about the possibility of finding more allies who could help her fight back against Fletcher's corruption. That afternoon, Maria called Linda Martinez and arranged to meet her at a coffee shop near the mall. Linda was a woman in her 50s, who had worked in mall administration for 7 years before Fletcher arrived. She had been responsible for managing security budgets and coordinating with store managers about safety concerns. Linda told Maria that Fletcher had been stealing money from the security budget almost from his first day on the job. He would submit expense reports for equipment and training that never actually happened. He would claim reimbursements for travel and meals that were completely fictional. Linda estimated that Fletcher had stolen at least $15,000 through fraudulent expense reports. When Linda tried to question Fletcher about the suspicious expenses, he became angry and defensive. He accused her of not understanding modern security management practices. He said that corporate headquarters had given him special authority to spend money however he thought was necessary. Linda knew this was not true, but Fletcher was her supervisor, and she felt pressured to approve his expense reports. The situation became worse when Linda discovered that Fletcher was also manipulating the schedules and payroll records for security guards. He was claiming overtime payments for hours that guards never actually worked. He was listing guards as present for shifts when they were not even at the mall. Linda realized that Fletcher was stealing money through payroll fraud as well as fake expense reports. When Linda finally decided to report Fletcher's financial crimes to corporate headquarters, Fletcher learned about her plans before she could make the report. The next day, he accused her of stealing petty cash from the security office and fired her immediately. Linda never had a chance to defend herself or explain what she had discovered about Fletcher's own theft activities. Linda still had copies of many documents that proved Fletcher's financial crimes. She had kept expense reports and payroll records that showed the patterns of fraud and theft. She was eager to join Maria's legal case and help expose everything Fletcher had been doing to steal money from the mall company. The next day, Maria met with Michael Thompson at the same coffee shop. Michael had worked as a maintenance supervisor at the mall for 5 years before Fletcher got him fired. Michael's job involved maintaining the security systems, including cameras, elevators, and alarm systems throughout the mall. Michael told Maria that Fletcher had asked him to disable certain security cameras during specific time periods. Fletcher claimed this was necessary for testing new equipment or updating software systems, but Michael quickly realized that Fletcher was asking him to turn off cameras so that his theft activities would not be recorded. Michael had refused to disable the security cameras because he knew this would violate mall safety policies and potentially put people at risk. Fletcher became furious when Michael would not cooperate with his requests. Fletcher started writing negative performance reviews about Michael and claiming that he was not completing his maintenance duties properly. The final confrontation came when Michael discovered that Fletcher was using his master keys to enter restricted areas of the mall without authorization. Michael found evidence that Fletcher had been in store storage rooms and office spaces where he had no legitimate reason to be. When Michael tried to report this security breach, Fletcher immediately fired him for allegedly damaging expensive equipment. But Michael had been documenting Fletcher's suspicious activities just like James and Linda had done. He had photographs of Fletcher in areas where he was not supposed to be. He had records of security system manipulations that Fletcher had requested. He had evidence of Fletcher accessing restricted areas without proper authorization. By Sunday evening, Maria found herself leading an informal coalition of 4 former employees who had all been victimized by Fletcher's corruption. Each person brought different types of evidence and testimony that painted a complete picture of Fletcher's criminal enterprise. Together, they had proof of theft, fraud, payroll manipulation, expense fraud, and security breaches. Sarah Chen was thrilled when she reviewed all the additional evidence and witness testimony that Maria had gathered. She explained that having multiple witnesses who could testify about different aspects of Fletcher's crimes would make their case extremely strong. Corporate executives and prosecutors would not be able to dismiss their complaints as the accusations of a single disgruntled employee. The group decided to coordinate their legal complaints and present a united front to the authorities. They would file their reports with police and corporate headquarters at the same time so that Fletcher could not manipulate the situation or destroy evidence before investigations began. Maria felt amazed by how quickly her situation had changed. Just 1 week earlier, she had been a lone security guard who discovered some theft on security cameras. Now she was leading a team of witnesses who could expose a massive criminal operation that had been going on for months. But Maria also felt the weight of responsibility for making sure their plan succeeded. The other former employees were counting on her leadership to help them get justice for what Fletcher had done to them. Store owners and current employees were depending on them to stop Fletcher's crimes and make the mall safe again. As Maria prepared for the confrontation that would happen the following week, she realized that Fletcher had made his biggest mistake when he chose to humiliate her so publicly. His cruelty had motivated her to fight back harder than she might have otherwise. His arrogance had caused him to underestimate her determination and intelligence. Fletcher thought he had ended Maria's threat to his criminal operation by burning her uniform and driving her away from the mall. Instead, he had created a coalition of enemies who were now armed with overwhelming evidence and determined to bring him to justice. Tuesday morning arrived clear and bright with golden sunlight streaming through the windows of Maria's apartment. She stood in front of her bathroom mirror, getting ready for the most important day of her life. Instead of her burned security uniform, Maria wore a simple black business suit that Sarah Chen had helped her choose. She looked professional and confident, even though her heart was beating fast with nervous excitement. Maria checked her watch and saw that it was time to meet the others at the coffee shop near the mall. Detective Rodriguez had arranged to meet Maria and her legal team there before they all went to the mall together. The plan they had worked out over the weekend was about to become reality. At exactly 9 o'clock, Maria walked into the coffee shop and found Detective Rodriguez waiting at a corner table. He was a serious man in his 40s who had spent 15 years investigating white-collar crimes. He carried a leather briefcase containing search warrants and arrest warrants that had been signed by a judge the previous day. Sarah Chen arrived a few minutes later, followed by investigative journalist Mark Thompson from Channel 7 News. Mark had reviewed all of Maria's evidence and was convinced that this story would be one of the biggest corruption cases in the city that year. He brought a camera operator who would document everything that happened at the mall. James Wilson, Linda Martinez, and Michael Thompson also joined the group at the coffee shop. Each of them carried folders containing their own evidence and testimony about Fletcher's crimes. They had all agreed to be interviewed by Mark Thompson after Fletcher was arrested so that the full story could be told to the public. Detective Rodriguez explained the plan one more time to make sure everyone understood their roles. He would enter the mall first and locate Fletcher in his office. Maria and the others would wait outside until Detective Rodriguez gave them the signal that it was safe to come inside. The news crew would film everything but stay out of the way of the police investigation. At 9:30, the group left the coffee shop and drove to Westfield Shopping Center in 3 separate cars. Maria felt strange returning to the place where she had been so humiliated just 1 week earlier. But this time she was not alone and she was not defenseless. This time she had the law on her side and justice in her heart. Detective Rodriguez entered the mall through the main entrance while Maria and the others waited in the parking lot. Through the glass doors, they could see him walking purposefully toward the security office, where Fletcher would be starting his morning shift. Maria's hands were shaking slightly as she watched the detective disappear around a corner. 10 minutes later, Detective Rodriguez's voice came through Sarah Chen's cell phone. Fletcher was in his office and the detective was ready to serve the search warrant. It was time for Maria and her team to enter the mall and witness Fletcher's arrest for the crimes he had committed against them and many others. Maria walked through the same glass doors. She had walked through hundreds of times as a security guard, but this time felt completely different. Store employees who recognized her stared in surprise as she passed by with her lawyer and the news crew. Some of them had witnessed her humiliation the week before and were clearly confused about why she had returned. The group found Detective Rodriguez in the security office with Fletcher and 2 other mall managers. Fletcher's face had gone completely white when he saw the search warrant and realized that his criminal activities had been discovered. He sat behind his desk looking shocked and confused while Detective Rodriguez read him his rights. When Fletcher saw Maria enter the office, his expression changed from confusion to pure rage. He started to stand up from his chair and point his finger at her while shouting that she was a liar and a thief. But Detective Rodriguez immediately ordered him to sit down and remain quiet. While the search warrant was being executed, Maria felt a surge of satisfaction as she watched Fletcher being treated like the criminal he was. This was the same man who had humiliated her by burning her uniform in front of dozens of people. This was the same supervisor who had accused her of stealing, while he was the one committing crimes every day. Now he was the one being arrested and handcuffed. Detective Rodriguez and 2 other police officers began searching Fletcher's office and seizing evidence. They took his computer and all of his files. They photographed everything in his desk drawers and filing cabinets. They collected keys and access cards that Fletcher had been using to enter stores illegally. While the police searched, the office Mark Thompson interviewed Maria about her experience and the evidence she had gathered. Maria spoke clearly and confidently about discovering Fletcher's crimes and the retaliation she had faced for trying to report them. She explained how Fletcher had destroyed her uniform and tried to destroy her reputation to protect his criminal operation. Store owners began arriving at the security office as word spread throughout the mall that Fletcher was being arrested. Mrs. Chen from the jewelry store looked shocked when she learned that Fletcher had been stealing from her shop for months. The manager of the electronics store was angry when he realized that Fletcher had been taking expensive items and blaming the losses on shoplifting. Several current security guards also came to see what was happening. They had worked under Fletcher's supervision and had suspected that something was wrong with his management style. Now they were learning that their supervisor had been a criminal who put all of them at risk by his illegal activities. Fletcher was officially arrested and handcuffed at 10:15 in the morning. As Detective Rodriguez led him out of the security office, Fletcher tried one last time to claim that Maria and the others were lying about him. He insisted that he was innocent and that the real criminals were the people who were accusing him. But no one was listening to Fletcher's protests anymore. Too many people had seen too much evidence of his crimes. Too many witnesses were ready to testify about what he had done. His lies and manipulations had finally caught up with him, and he was going to face the consequences. Maria stood in the security office where she had worked faithfully for 3 years. She looked at the desk where Fletcher had accused her of being a thief. She remembered the moment when he had ripped her badge from her uniform and torn the fabric. She thought about watching her uniform burn in the parking lot while Fletcher claimed she was a criminal. Now Fletcher was the one being led away in handcuffs. Now Fletcher was the one whose reputation was being destroyed in front of everyone. The truth had won over his lies. Justice had triumphed over his corruption. Maria and her allies had proven that even powerful people could not escape the consequences of their crimes. But this was not just about revenge or getting back at Fletcher for what he had done to Maria. This was about protecting other employees from being victimized by corrupt supervisors. This was about making sure that store owners could trust the people who were supposed to protect their businesses. As Maria watched the police car drive away with Fletcher in the back seat, she felt a sense of closure and accomplishment. She had kept her promise to herself to fight back against his crimes. She had turned her humiliation into determination and her anger into action. The burned uniform was gone forever, but Maria had found something much more valuable. She had discovered her own strength and courage. She had learned that one person could make a difference when they were willing to stand up for what was right, even when it was difficult and dangerous. Fletcher thought he had destroyed Maria when he burned her uniform and drove her away from the mall. Instead, he had created his own worst enemy. Maria had returned armed not with weapons but with something much more powerful. She had returned with the truth and the determination to see justice done. 3 weeks after Fletcher's arrest, Maria sat in a courtroom watching the judge read the criminal charges against her former supervisor. The investigation had moved faster than anyone expected because the evidence was so clear and complete. Fletcher was being charged with theft, fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit crimes totaling more than $80,000 in stolen money and merchandise. Detective Rodriguez had discovered that Fletcher's criminal operation was even larger than Maria and her allies had realized. Police found stolen goods in Fletcher's home and garage worth over $30,000. They also discovered bank accounts where Fletcher had been depositing money from selling stolen merchandise to buyers throughout the city. The 2 mall managers who had helped Fletcher with his crimes were also arrested and charged. Security camera footage showed them participating in thefts on dozens of different occasions. Phone records revealed that they had been coordinating with outside buyers who specifically requested certain types of merchandise to be stolen from the mall stores. During the court hearing, Fletcher's lawyer tried to claim that Maria and the other former employees had made up their accusations because they were angry about being fired. But the prosecutor had too much evidence for these arguments to be successful. Video recordings, bank records, and witness testimony all proved that Fletcher had been running a major criminal enterprise. Maria testified about discovering the security footage and about Fletcher's violent retaliation when he learned about her investigation. She spoke clearly and confidently about watching Fletcher burn her uniform in the mall parking lot. The judge seemed shocked when Maria described how Fletcher had humiliated her in front of customers and employees. James, Wilson, Linda Martinez, and Michael Thompson also testified about their experiences with Fletcher's crimes and corruption. Each witness provided different pieces of the puzzle that proved Fletcher had been stealing and committing fraud for more than a year. Their combined testimony was so convincing that Fletcher's lawyer advised him to accept a plea agreement. Fletcher was sentenced to 3 years in state prison and ordered to pay full restitution to all the stores and people he had stolen from. The judge said that Fletcher had violated the trust placed in him as a security supervisor and had caused serious harm to many innocent people. The sentence would serve as a warning to other supervisors who might consider abusing their positions of authority. But the criminal case was only part of Maria's victory. Her civil lawsuit against the mall company was settled out of court for a substantial amount of money. Sarah Chen had convinced the corporate executives that they were liable for allowing Fletcher to operate his criminal enterprise. Without proper oversight or investigation, the settlement included back pay for all the time Maria had been unemployed after Fletcher fired her. It also included damages for emotional distress and punitive payments designed to punish the company for not protecting their employees from a corrupt supervisor. Most importantly, the settlement required the mall company to implement new policies for investigating employee complaints and protecting whistleblowers. Maria's story attracted national attention after Mark Thompson's news reports were picked up by television networks across the country. Maria appeared on several talk shows and news programs to discuss her experience and encourage other employees to report workplace corruption. Her courage inspired dozens of other workers to come forward with their own stories of abuse and retaliation. 6 months after Fletcher's arrest, Maria used her settlement money to open a small restaurant in a shopping district near her apartment. She had always dreamed of owning her own business but never had the financial resources to make it happen. The money from her lawsuit gave her the security she needed to take the risk of becoming an entrepreneur. Maria decided to name her restaurant Phoenix Rising because it represented her ability to rebuild her life from the ashes of the burned uniform. The restaurant specialized in traditional Mexican food that reminded Maria of meals her grandmother had cooked when she was a child. The warm atmosphere and delicious food quickly attracted customers from throughout the neighborhood. Phoenix Rising became more than just a restaurant. It became a gathering place for employees from the mall and other local businesses. Workers would come to Maria's restaurant to eat lunch and discuss their experiences with difficult supervisors or workplace problems. Maria offered advice and support to anyone who needed help standing up for their rights. The restaurant walls were decorated with framed newspaper articles about Maria's case and photographs from her court appearances. Maria kept one special photograph on the wall behind the cash register. It showed the moment when Detective Rodriguez placed handcuffs on Fletcher in the mall security office. The photograph reminded Maria and her customers that justice was possible, even when it seemed impossible. Mrs. Chen from the jewelry store became one of Maria's regular customers. She often told other diners about how Maria had saved her business by exposing Fletcher's thefts. Mrs. Chen estimated that Fletcher had stolen over $10,000 worth of jewelry from her store before Maria stopped his criminal activities. James, Wilson, Linda Martinez, and Michael Thompson also became regular customers at Phoenix Rising. The 4 former mall employees remained close friends who supported each other through the legal proceedings and the challenges of finding new jobs. They celebrated each milestone in the criminal case and civil lawsuit together at Maria's restaurant. Carlos successfully graduated from nursing school and found a job at the city hospital. He told everyone who would listen that his sister Maria was a hero who had risked everything to fight corruption and protect other people. Carlos was proud that Maria had turned her terrible experience into something positive that helped many other workers. Maria's mother was amazed by how much her daughter had accomplished since losing her security job. She had watched Maria struggle with depression and anger after Fletcher burned her uniform, But she had also seen Maria transform that pain into determination and strength that inspired people throughout the community. 2 years after opening, Phoenix Rising Maria was invited to speak at a conference for employment lawyers and workers' rights advocates. She told her story to an audience of attorneys and activists who were fighting similar battles in courts and legislatures across the country. Maria's case had become an example of how ordinary employees could successfully challenge powerful corporations and corrupt supervisors. During her speech, Maria talked about the moment when Fletcher burned her uniform in the mall parking lot. She explained that watching her uniform turn to ash had been one of the most painful experiences of her life. But she also said that the burned uniform had become a symbol of transformation rather than just destruction. Maria told the audience that Fletcher thought he was destroying her when he burned her uniform and drove her away from the mall. Instead, he had accidentally given her the motivation she needed to fight back harder than she ever would have otherwise. His cruelty had backfired and led to his own downfall. The uniform was gone, but Maria had found something much more valuable in its place. She had discovered that she was stronger and braver than she had ever imagined. She had learned that one person could make a difference when they refused to accept injustice and corruption. Fletcher remained in prison serving his sentence and would not be eligible for parole for at least 2 more years. The mall had hired a new security supervisor who implemented honest management practices and treated all employees with respect. The stores had recovered their stolen merchandise and improved their security procedures. Maria looked at her reflection in the restaurant window as she prepared to close Phoenix Rising for the evening. She saw a successful business owner who had built something beautiful from the ashes of her worst experience. She saw a woman who had turned her pain into purpose and her anger into action. The burned uniform would always be part of Maria's story. But it was no longer the ending of her story. It had become the beginning of something much better. Maria had risen from those ashes like a phoenix and created a new life that was stronger and more meaningful than anything Fletcher could have destroyed. Every day at Phoenix Rising reminded Maria that justice was worth fighting for no matter how much it cost. Every customer who shared their own workplace struggles reminded her that her courage had inspired others to stand up for themselves. Every success story that began in her restaurant proved that one person's determination could create positive change that lasted long after the initial battle was won.